Hey guys, welcome to the third rabbit trail video for the first study. In the last study, we started talking about how the context will help you understand how to interpret the content of that writing. In the last one, we looked at how numbers in many ways could set a context for you to be able to read the content within the story. Another example of that, like in our society, when we read things, we read turns of phrases that are once upon a time. When we read Once Upon a Time, we know immediately, okay, this is some kind of fairy tale, this is some sort of fiction story, right? And so instantly our brains know how to read the content within it. Or if we say, if you hear something like a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, instantly you know, okay, this is some sort of dramatic space opera kind of thing, right? So, within their society, they had those colloquialisms where everybody knew exactly what they were talking about, but also because they knew the text so well when they were studying, it was these little turns of phrases within the braille that I was talking about last time. They could also begin to understand what the context is that the writer's trying to set for them to understand how to interpret the content. An example of this is in this whole document that we're talking about here, from Genesis all the way to Deuteronomy, the Torah that we discussed. This is one document, and it's written in one specific genre, one specific format. There's subgenres within it, but there's one specific format that people immediately recognize in their society. You see, this whole thing was written as a treaty document. Now, treaty documents between two nations were very interesting because they never started with the stipulations for the treaty. They always started with a historical prologue. They always started by recounting all of the interactions between the two nations, the skirmishes, the wars, whatever happened. They talked about all of that first. So they had all that on the table. Then they started into what the rules and regulations and what the context will be of the treaty itself. And this follows that exact same pattern. From Genesis 1:1 to Exodus 19:2, it is the historical prologue of the interactions between God and humankind, right? And so what happens here is at this moment right here is the moment when God descends in a cloud onto Mount Sinai, and the Israelites are there at the base of the mountain, and they send Moses up. And what happens there? The treaty. God gives him, remember, the Ten Commandments and all that. And so from here, from 19:2 all the way through to the end of the Torah, there's different genres within there. So there's some narrative within there. There's some actual laws and regulations within there and all that. But this out here is the treaty proper, and this right here is the historical prologue that leads into the treaty. It leads into that moment when there is a treaty that's made between God and man, and they're no longer at war, right? All right. Well, here's the cool thing. Within this historical prologue, which contains the text that we're reading, you find that this thing right here, there is a turn of phrase, a braille kind of thing in there, that is, these are the generations of. So as they were reading and studying these texts, they would find these are the generations of, and they'd be reading these are the generations of. Oh, and they started looking at the pattern that was happening here and figuring out that there was actually a structure to this historical prologue. The structure is this. It actually breaks down into, you guessed it, 7 parts. So it's the prehistory that we're studying, and then you have God or Yahweh, and Abraham, and Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, the Exodus, Yahweh, and the wilderness. Okay? So, cool thing about this is it's not 7 by accident. 7 means, again, not just that time has passed from here to here, but it passed in a way that brought about the full perfection and completeness. It wasn't that they happened to cross paths here. It was that God, working in all of this, created a perfection, a fullness, a completeness to get to this moment. And that's really interesting because I see this in people's lives. This right here you can consider like a conversion event, people call it, or a moment when a person says, okay, yes, you are my God and I am your son, or I am your daughter. It's that moment when we become a Christian, as a lot of people kind of refer to it. But the interesting thing is, even if a person isn't a Christian, all of this is before that treaty, and all of this is what? God working in these people's lives. So it's a lot of people think that, if you're not a Christian or if you deny God or whatever, that God's not going to be working in your life. It's not true at all. Because I know a lot of people who are not at that moment yet. I know people who have had, interactions with God. they've kind of stumbled across this path, but yet they're definitely not to this moment. They're not ready to sign any kind of treaty with God. But yet, I sense in them the Spirit moving in them and through them and all around them as strong as I do any Christian who is like totally given their lives to God. So it's like, I totally, and these texts are saying that, you know what, no matter where a person is on this journey, you know, it doesn't matter where they are, because here's where God is. God is always working in their lives from beginning to end. So, of course, what ends up happening is this is the perfect historical prologue, the fullness and completeness of God working through them to get into this moment, right? Well, in our history, in our prehistory that we're studying, like the first part of this text, what do you think you have? You have 7 parts, which is right here. Creation, humankind's generation, 10 generations from Adam to Noah, flood, humankind's generation, 10 generations from Shem to Abram, and then the conclusion of Abram. Now, the fascinating thing about this is, what do we have here? We have completion and perfection inside of perfection, inside of perfection. It's almost like, if this is like the perfect history, then this is like the perfect prehistory. This is the perfect, what they call this section of scripture is like the universal history, or, you know, it's like, in a way it's saying, this is the perfect record of how God has worked in the world to get, you know, humanity to that point. This is the perfect record of how the world works. But the interesting thing about this is, if you watch here, there's a cycle that happens. It's an A, B, C, and then it repeats A prime, B prime, C prime. It concludes with it like a crescendo, like a D. Question is, how closely are these related? Can you really say this, that this is like a cyclical happening? Because, like, okay, creation and the flood, those don't sound related at all, and yet they totally are. And the way that they are is, again, that braille of being able to read the text so carefully that you're seeing all these signals, that the text itself is signaling, hey, look at this, look at this, look at this. I want to show you what's actually going on beneath the surface. So comparing like these two, like the creation account and the flood account, watch what the text is doing. It starts out with creation, dry land appears. Flood, dry land appears. These are like actual like phrases that are within the text. Every living thing, every living thing. Birds, birds. Creeps, creeps. Male and female, after their kind, after their kind. Blessings on animals, blessings on animals, blessings on people, blessings on people. Food provided, food provided. This is the structure of the story and the structure of that story. And they use these specific phrases so that you cannot, like, you know, miss it at all. These are structures that are parallel with each other. The same thing happens with these two things, with the humankind degeneration. There is a cyclical pattern that occurs where it starts off with a sin that occurs, or sins that occur. And then God deliberates in first person plural every time. It's weird. And then what happens is, then there's like a movement where there's like a scattering that occurs. And this doesn't just happen once or twice. This happens over and over and over again. It's like signaling this kind of like cyclical pattern of life. And how these are not just like what happened to one person at one time. These are the patterns and the cycles that we always see. Now, the cool thing about this is, you know how hard it would be to write like good literature that's able to have this kind of structure in it of cyclical nature like this? Not only did they write the structure within it, they wrote multiple structures within the same text. So over here I wrote the other structure that you can find within these same chapters. And not only is it like a 7-section like perfection, but it's a 7-section like cycling pattern. So it's like perfection upon perfection. It's like trying to signal you that there are cycles that are continually happening here. Where this is really interesting how you have like the creation story, where it's like a first beginning, and then you have the flood story, a new beginning. You have the sin of Adam, where they discuss nakedness. You have the sin of Ham, where they discuss nakedness. The younger righteous son Abel, the younger righteous son Japheth. Then you have descendants of the sinful son Cain, descendants of the sinful son Ham, descendants of the chosen son Seth, descendants of the chosen son Shem. And then you have divine judgment on a kind of unlawful union. And you have divine judgment on like the humans trying to unionize in a sense. Here you have a brief introduction of Noah, through whom God will bless. And then you ended here with a brief introduction of Abram, through whom God will bless. both of these, all this going on at the same time. And the reason that the writers put so much emphasis on these first 11 chapters and such cyclical patterns is they really want you to realize that this is not only like something that happened to one person at one time in history. More importantly, these are the paradigms and cycles that always happen. So it's really important that as we're reading through these texts, we take like one step back and we say, okay, not only is this like the story of the interactions between like God and Cain, or God and creation, or between like brothers or whatever. Not only is it that story, but I need to take a step back and say, what are the paradigms happening here? What is the situation happening here? Because what I've noticed a lot throughout my life is there'll be times when I'll be walking through and I'm like, oh, this is Genesis 3. Oh, this is Genesis 6. Or oh my gosh, this is Genesis 10. This is Genesis 4, you know? And so it'll be like, I'll be in a situation where it'll be like, I don't know quite the right choice to make or which door to walk through, or it doesn't seem like any door is opening. I just don't know what quite to do. I'll be like, I'll step back and I'll say, where am I? I'm in Genesis 5, or I'm in Genesis 6, or oh, okay. Well, what was the situation there? What was the paradigm? What was the interactions? And what was the right choice? Or what was the wrong choice that ended up happening? So then I can like come back in, apply it to the situation and be like, all right, if this is that situation, then the right choice fits this pattern and fits this choice that I can make, and the wrong choice kind of fits like this pattern or this choice that I can make. And it begins just like illuminating and opening doors and showing me which doors not to walk through, and just helps me kind of make the right choices in certain decisions. Now I'll tell you, I don't make all the right choices in life. I don't want you guys to come away with it thinking that. But the times when I'm smart enough to actually like, you know, hit myself over the head, take a step back and think about what's going on, you know, that meta step. Those are situations where it's like, okay, I've been an idiot. I know where I'm at. I know what I'm doing right now. I know, you know what character I'm being in a sense. I know what I need to do in this situation. And it really helps me in a lot of situations kind of illuminate the right path. Torah, instruction, pointing the right way to go. So with that, I'm excited. Let's get into the next lesson, which will be actually getting into the text itself. Let's do this.